Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Dialogues and Dice here on How We Roll. I am Gorbad, and joining me is...
I'm Shaggit.
You might know
DM
who
and
we
player.
are.
Yeah, that's who we are. Because we're not introducing our characters and what we are and what we're playing.
Yeah, we're like real people or something.
Yeah, I'm Shaggit. Hi, that's
So before we get any further, Sassika, thanks for the resub. Dr. Optimal, thank you for the resub as well. 75 months for Sass. Sup, bitches? And Dr. Optimal, 34 months for you. So, our beloved Satchmo, Mitchie is her birthday today. I think she officially turns 22. So he is kind of forced into obligations that you would expect to have when a birthday is had by your significant other. Because of where we left off, I didn't really want to try to play that particular part of Curse Strahd without him, so instead you get us and a episode of Dialogues and Dice.
I have to be that person in chat. If your significant other has a birthday and you have a show that you've said you're going to do every Monday, if it was me, I'd be like, sorry, babe, but I gotta see about a stream.
Gotta see a man about a stream.
Yeah,
No,
like,
it's all good, man.
I'd shut them aside for the. I'd be like,
Open-handed Badger, what's up, buddy? I'm glad you're here because what we're talking about in Let's Talk tonight is kind of one of the questions. Was the question that you asked us. So there we go. I don't know if what's his face? Who's his name? Forgot his name. Isn't that terrible?
Dead Kid?
Yeah, Dead Kid
right?
55. If he's here, he gave me a monster suggestion that he'd like to see turn into a thing, so we're making that a thing. So there we go. But
Cool.
yes, if you're new, this is Dialogues and Dice. We talk about D&D. We used to run this show before. It was very show-centric. It kind of focused on the campaigns that we were playing. Now it's back in its 2.0 version, and now it is very much more just D&D centric and not How We Roll specific. So there we go. Hopefully you guys got some questions for us. Yeah, we're gonna have a little jaunt down memory lane as well tonight, aren't we?
Yes. We've been reminiscing, spending a lot of our afternoon coming up with dates and times and chronologically. You'll see why in a second, but it was fun. I mean, to go down memory lane and make crack jokes and fun of each other. Yeah.
But anyways, so we're going to go ahead and get things going tonight, and with our first segment.
Let's talk.
Alrighty. Yes, indeed. Well, why is that not working? Oh, because I did the wrong one. There we go. Okay, let's talk. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, we got some things we're going to discuss. And one of those things is the topic that kind of got it all kicked off. So, Open-handed Badger asked us a question, and it was basically, if I'd have been smart, I'd have had it right here to read it to you.
I can read it if
but
you want.
Shaggit can do that.
I am
he is smart.
So Open-handed Badger wrote an email pretty much immediately after our first Dialogues and Dice. I'm going to skip a little bit because some of it's just like you missed some of the show. But his main question was this. One topic might be how you managed yourselves as streamers. I've gathered from bits and pieces over the years that everyone has a role in keeping things up and running. How does that balance with the role-playing? What are the tasks and how does the skill of running a stream get a trade-off for role-playing skill? What system, hardware and software do you use? What led to that choice, etc., etc.? It may not be entirely D&D and a little bit systematic, but I found How We Roll different from other streams than so many of the other streams out there that I'm more curious about it than others. You said some things about coaching an esports team in high school and stuff like that. And as for guests, he had other suggestions like that as well. People we could possibly get for Dialogues and Dice in the near future. But that's essentially the crux of why we're doing tonight.
There you go.
And
so yeah, D&D streaming in specific. So we all know there are a lot of different D&D streams out here, but we want to go back to the very beginning. And we're going to kind of flip-flop between me. So I'll start it off, and then I'm going to let Shagget kind of pick up once he enters the proverbial room, as it were. So in early July 2014, there was about 3 to 5 Twitch D&D channels. They were very basic, they were very clunky, the best of which at the time was probably Misclicks, and there was a Spanish-speaking D&D stream. And I had a concept. I've been playing D&D since 1978 and thought, this is a thing I can do. I was already streaming on Twitch, but I was streaming typical video games and not having a lot of fun with it, because I found in order to grow the stream, you had to do things that appeased the audience, and they weren't things that appeased me. They weren't fun. But I knew, no matter what, if I was doing D&D, I would have fun. So at the time, there was a little group of us that had kind of pulled together. Bane was a female variety streamer. Had a great personality. I had guest starred or hosted on some of her shows, and she had guest hosted on some of mine. So I approached her and said, hey, I got this concept. I want to run D&D, but I want to do it different than everybody else. She loved the idea, and initially we approached 2 other people. One was WoW Profits, also known as Profits TV, and also Gothic Wizard, who at the time lived in Profits' house. They had both played D&D before. They were excited to play D&D, so we had the concept, we talked about it, and that was originally going to be your cast. Me, and then Bane, Profits, and Gothic Wizard as your players. Now, Gothic Wizard used to play Skyrim a lot. And for any of you that are very familiar with Skyrim, you'll know that when you go AFK with Skyrim... That's yeah. After a few minutes, what happens is it comes and it pans out to your character in 3D, and then it circles around you. Well, he was using a mod, which was the all-nude mod in high def, which looked very realistic, and he went AFK. Now, when he went AFK, and believe me, there is relevance to this, when he went AFK, for over 30 minutes, he left the stream up, and so he had a nude 3D image of a woman just spinning round and round and round, and yes, you guessed it, it is an absolute violation of Twitch's terms of service, and he got reported and consequently banned. The problem is, when they ban you on Twitch, they ban you at the IP address level. Because he was streaming from WoW Profits, aka Profits TV's house, it indirectly banned everybody else in the household, which is basically about 3 or 4 different streamers. So they got their panties in a wad. Now, I'm going to be completely transparent. I thought, in regards to Gothic Wizard, who I liked, he was a great guy. He co-hosted one of my St. Jude streams that I did. Serves you right. Should have known better. However, I felt really bad that Profits and his wife and somebody else in the house got banned, and felt that was a little unjust.
Especially since Profits is most well known. He played WoW content, World of Warcraft content, but he had created an add-on for it that dealt with the auction house, and it was quite successful. He was one of the creators of it, and that's how I knew him, because we both played World of Warcraft simultaneously at that same time. And that's unfair that he gets punished for what the other guy did. Yeah, right. Yeah, sorry.
So I talked to him, and basically was like, look, you just appeal it, dude. Just appeal it. Once they realize what's happened, they will sort it out. Well, he did appeal it, but while doing so, he got very upset. They got themselves in a tiz, and they left the Twitch platform and went to something called Hitbox, which was also kind of very quickly renamed Shitbox because it was not a good streaming platform. But they had drawn a proverbial line in the sand where Twitch was concerned, and he said, hey, if we're going to do this D&D show, it's got to be on Hitbox. And me and Bane looked at each other and said, later, because that was not a thing we were willing to do. So, then, we are now in kind of late July, August. And me and Bane are still hell-bent on this. Now, we also, as I mentioned, there was like a little group of us. So we said, okay. Bane had never played D&D before. So I was like, I think the best way that this content is going to work is either all brand new players who have never played before or all veteran players, right? Mixing the two doesn't work well because you're going to have limelight stealers and people that are inexperienced are not going to speak up, and it's going to... So we decided, let's find 2 people, or 3, to step in and be noobs. No play. They'd never played before, or at least very minimal, right? So Jane Ivana was streaming. Again, variety Twitch streamer. There was a little group of us, but she had we gelled, had a good personality. So we thought about her, but I had also thought about this dude, right? Because one late night, I stumbled across this streamer, because I started doing this thing where I would go to the bottom of the stream list and find who didn't have views, right? People that didn't have views. Because I didn't want to see a stream. I didn't want to go to the channels where, if I'm watching Twitch, I didn't want to go to the channel where the chat is moving faster than you can see, right? So I went to the bottom of the pile. And there's this dude. And he's streaming, and he's just really funny and really entertaining, and I'm watching, and we're chatting away and whatnot, and I'm like, and bottom line is, we kind of gelled. We had a few really interesting stories. He started doing these Draw My Lives, which, dude, to this day, I still love.
I was tipsy at the time, or drunk. I was drunk for one of them, tipsy for the first one.
But basically, he would tell a story, and then he would hand draw it on the screen for you to watch. And of course, the art was terrible, but that's what made it fun. But anyway, enter this dude right here.
Sure, yeah.
So, and I said, hey, we have this idea. So tell us about, at that point, your background and why you got involved and what made you want to jump in on this craziness.
So I never joined Twitch with the intention of becoming big or successful. I figured I'm a fat white guy. There's several of us on this platform. Like, how would I stand out? But I did want to be more consistent with my streaming. So what I was actually doing was playing mostly League of Legends, some World of Warcraft, some Guild Wars, some Hearthstone when it first came out. But I was playing League of Legends with my friends, my real life friends, and sometimes they would get home from work and we'd be in a game, and I didn't want them just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. So I started streaming so they could watch as I played. That was basically the whole intention of me streaming. And then the Draw My Lives was really me trying to tell a story, and some people in chat, mostly my friends, being like, I don't understand, what are you saying? You're not making any sense. And and then a couple strangers came in, namely Gorbad, and some others, I think, from the community that Gorbad and Bane had fostered. I mean, the support small streamer stream with Lady Orange and
Regimika,
Legends of Glory, yeah, a lot of other people.
I mean, there was a bunch of us back then, and we all used to. What we did is we all come up with this concept of. We all streamed at different days and times, and then we all went into each other's streams and brought our communities. So, although none of us had more than maybe 20 viewers,
we
brought all of those viewers to each stream, and consequently, it helped our little streams grow and gave us more interaction.
Celtic Dragoness was another one. I mean, the idea was we had our schedules, and we made sure not to overlap them too severely. so that when one stream ended, we could push them before raids were a feature on Twitch, because now you could raid other channels. But at that time, they didn't have that feature.
Yep.
So it's just like, okay, everyone go here, and that's how it would kind of carry over. And it was great because we could talk about the other streams maybe that we missed, or the futures, from the other streamers to each other. And chat was very lively for that very reason, because they were talking about what they just witnessed, what they just experienced. And, you as a streamer would be like, oh, that's great. And you wouldn't be talking into a void of nobody, which is what small streams typically tend to do, right? You know what
that's it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it worked for us, but because of that, I actually did approach Lady Orange and asked her if she wanted to be part of it. She was very much on the fence, and I think ultimately she felt a little bit self-conscious, so she decided against it. And we was like, well, you know what? 3 is plenty. So that was who we went with. We basically had Bane, Shagget, and Jay Nirvana. So fast forward just a little bit. We first went live in September 2014.
It's September, yeah.
Now, at the time, as I said, there were only a handful. I can think of 3 for sure, but I don't ever remember seeing more than 5 individual D&D streams at that time. Bearing in mind, this is way pre Critical Role. It was also like there was no affiliate program then. It was you are partnered or you are nothing, right? That's how it was. So what I wanted to do different was I was like, look, I want to play D&D, but I want it to be way more visual. I don't want there to be a little hand-drawn squiggly map in the middle and just a bunch of blank cameras kind of like stuck together like a Google Hangout sort of thing. And then people physically rolling their dice on the table and trying to tilt their cameras. I want to make this more production-wise. So this is why we decided we wanted overlay and put people in their little windows. And at the time, we used the early version of Open Broadcast Software, OBS, to broadcast the Twitch. We used Skype to capture the video windows, which we moved away from eventually, and there's reasons we'll talk about. And we decided we would use, at the time, all of the virtual tabletops, such as D&D Beyond, Fantasy Grounds, Roll20. There were only a couple of them, and they weren't good. But Roll20 at the time was ahead of the others. Bearing in mind, Fantasy Grounds and D&D Beyond did not exist at that point. So it was Roll20 was the best of the bunch. So we opted for Roll20. Put the work in to learn that, and consequently, that's how we initially put our stream down. Now, if you guys remember, initially what we did is we flipped between one screen was just information and all the players, and then another screen would switch to have the battle map on, and I used to have to switch scenes. Which initially we thought that's how we wanted it, but
because if the focus should be on the players role playing because it's a role play scene, you don't need the map visual, right? I mean, that's kind of the logic of that choice. We then found later on, well, actually, people kind of, what if they come in when we're on the role play screen, they don't know what the hell's going on or where we are, which is why we deviated from that. Pretty quickly, actually. Like the second campaign, I think we started just having singular. Yeah. Pretty quickly.
At the time, Bane did the graphics, she did the overlay and all that, because she was fairly good at that in comparison to the rest of us, for sure. I learned how to use the OBS software. And then, we someone asked about the Session Zero. What was the first Session Zero like? Well, it was a lot of Session Zeros, because we were basically explaining the concept of D&D and kind of not just talking Session Zeros, but it was like here I'm going to spoon feed you the rules as fast as I possibly can, and you're going to swallow as many of them as you can, and hopefully you'll have enough of them that by the time we start playing, you'll at least know what the sort of concept is. Which we did. And if you guys watch some of those first episodes, that was one of the things, like when everyone was new and shiny, we were learning how to stream D&D. And we're going to kind of break down some of this stuff, but we found very quickly that there are a lot of differences when you're playing D&D on a stream than when you're around a tabletop, because just the very nature of it made it very different.
One of those session zeros was Gore made a couple maps, and he basically ran us through a one shot or a very little one shot. So we could get so we as players who are new, not so much learning the rules, although that of course was part of it, but learning the format, the expectation, the back and forth, how we talk to each other, DM to player. I mean, that was also learning how to use Roll20, because all the players, myself included, didn't know how to use Roll20, what this panel meant, what this little icon was for, how to use the character sheet, how to set that all in. So we played, I played a barbarian named Thrug or something, and Jane played something, and Bane played something else. And we basically went to this abandoned cathedral, went to the basement, there were zombies and ghosts and crap. Like, it was very simple, but it really gave us a sense of how the flow of the game would go with Gore as the DM. Yeah. Just so we could all kind of click better, mesh better, So that was one of the sessions
That's it. We did. And going back to the original idea, I did not want to do a stream where you watched us play D&D. I wanted to use D&D to tell a story and pull chat and the viewers into the story itself, not see a bunch of mechanics, not concentrate on a ton of roles and stuff like that. So we had a different concept on how we wanted to do it from early on. Little did I know how much additional work that was going to create.
Gore spent many of those early years spending a lot of hours on Roll20, doing Roll20 work, because he was learning it as he went as well. Piecing maps together, tokens, icons. So he put several extra hours per week than any of the players, even all of us combined. We barely measured up to what Gore was putting on behind the scenes. Yeah, I'm not jealous of that, for sure.
We played twice a week, and in the early days, we played 3 hours each session. So we had a 6-hour playtime, but in general, I had 13 to 16 hours of background prep time I was doing. It's not that now, because I'm so much more familiar with Roll20. I can do things a lot quicker. I've got a lot of resources at my disposal now that I can reuse and stuff like that. But at the time, it was. So the technical side of it, I guess. We've moved on a little bit. We still use OBS. OBS is still what we use to capture, although it is now Streamlabs OBS, right?
Yeah.
We moved from Skype to Zoom because Skype got updated, and when it got updated, it changed how it did the windows, and it wouldn't allow us to have enough windows up and visible at one time. It kept moving someone into the corner. So we had to move to Zoom, but honestly, Zoom works a lot better, although we do have to pay $15 a month for Zoom, where Skype was free. But Zoom allows me to rearrange the player windows. Again, if you remember in the early days, if somebody dropped, I had to go recapture everybody and reposition everybody, and it was a big fiasco. Now all I have to do is just slide people around until they're all in the right slot, so it's a lot better. And, obviously we got better cameras, we got better microphones, and we improved what we do. But that's where it all started. And then obviously you've got 8 years of evolution. During those 8 years, we've learned a lot of things. And we've seen a lot of things happen. So I guess the first thing we're going to do, we talked a little bit about the technical, how we pull it all together. Obviously, you configure OBS, you broadcast to Twitch. whoever the DM is or whoever's going to host it has the overlay. We plug everything into layers and we create this thing for you guys to look at. And again, as different people have come in with different talents, Satchmo draws the damn overlays. Like, he literally hand draws them. The latest overlay is incredible. It's a work of art. I love it. So, you know. But, so there's different formats that we've seen. And I'm gonna highlight them, and then I'm gonna let Shagget kind of talk about them. So the first format is, here's my table, one camera, look, we're playing D&D, watch us. The second format is the high production, but still at the table level, a la Critical Role, how they do things. And then there is the window capture, which I don't want to say we created, but we definitely were on the cut. That was like, we were definitely, if not the first, one of the first to do that, and do it that way. And you know, and there's pros and cons to all of those. So, Shagget, why don't you talk about those?
I mean, I think it really comes down to wanting the viewers to immediately know where we are, and that is something that if you're doing a stream where it's just a bunch of people around a big table, maybe with a camera doing an overshot of someone with a maze maps, which you would find at home, right? Like a home table game. It's not always as obvious or clear in terms of the presentation, what's happening, who's who, what's what. The information is not quite there in the same way, I feel, like as what we've done. Although, of course, what we did, we learned as we went. So, I mean, we made a lot of mistakes in the beginning, too. Like going on session-long shopping sprees and then figuring out, well, that actually is not conducive to streaming. Like, if you were at home at a table, yeah, let's buy our magical items or whatever, right? Level up. Whereas with us, it was just show. Like, you got to put on a show and you want to get from A to B to Z, 1, 2, 3, you know, all that. But it also just kind of looks clunkier, right? Like everyone's sitting around a table, some are in focus, some are out of focus. You don't see the character sheets, so you don't quite know what everyone does. We had a website where you could look at our character sheets. We've kind of not done that recently, but still, you know, the idea's there. And it just doesn't feel personal, I guess is the right, because it feels like you're just peering in through a window at a people in a basement around a table playing a game. Whereas we kind of wanted it to be a show with a story that is for you, not, you know, and for us, like kind of both, where you're not peering in like a creeper and someone's building, like, what are they doing? Oh my God, they're rolling dice. I guess that's one of them, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, the reason I didn't go that route was because as much as I love D&D, I cannot sit and watch a bunch of people sitting around a table playing D&D for very long.
I mean, yeah, especially since a lot of the times they're chewing food, they're getting up, going to the bathroom. I mean, you know, it feels really not intimate, right? Like, we want you to be as up close and personal to what we're doing,
right?
And not let you down with that.
That's it.
Chewing and popcorn and crap.
And then the next evolution of that concept, I guess, is where Critical Role is at. But they can do it on a much higher production level because they have cameras, crews, and they are playing around the table, but you get to see the individual players a lot more.
Correct.
You know, and stuff like that. So, you know, that's. But then the way we did it, or do it, was to go back to what you'd said. The idea was when somebody comes into How We Roll, I don't want the mods to have to write 2 paragraphs of the story so far. I don't want them to have to loiter around to see if they can pick up and have a million questions. By having... Originally they were called battle maps, and the idea was you just had a map if there was a combat encounter.
Right.
I was like, nope. We will have a map for absolutely everything. Whether it's just walking around town, going into a store, hanging out at the tavern. And that's where all that massive amount of work came in, because everything I did required me to make all the maps. And if I made a big city like Corthan, which was 4 huge big screens. It was so big at the time, Roll20 couldn't do it. Could not handle it. I had to break it into 4 separate quadrants to make Roll20 cope with it. But I also had to figure out, okay, I have come up with this huge city with all this stuff. The players are, in theory, can go in any one of these buildings, so I had to make an interior for every frigging building that the players might feasibly go to. And while it was a lot of fun, it was a lot of work. But at the end of the day, we really did manage to get it to where no matter what the players did, you got a visual representation of what was happening. And we got a lot of feedback, like, this is so much easier to follow. This is awesome. So we was like, okay, we've opened the can of worms now. We're kind of stuck with this. In a good way.
Also, and this is, the last thing I want to do right now is knock how people play the game, because there are many ways to play the game, and all of them are valid. If it works for them, the people at the table, more power to them. We approached D&D as a storytelling apparatus to tell a story. So our focus was story first, always story first. We would have pre-show sessions, we still do, 30 minutes before a show, where we would say, what happened last time? Where's your character thinking? Just so we could kind of get in the mindset of continuing consistently. And of course, we're not perfect. There's been some instances where our characters act wildly different in the next session, but I mean, that's because we're all only human. But because we were story first, rules came second. This was also a learn as you went. Like, how do we properly explain what our homebrews are? Sometimes chat would not be completely clear, but we kind of learned as we went. Like, okay, let's be clear about what our homebrews are. Let's be clear about what these are. It became a different, streaming became what streaming was, and I personally prefer it. Other tables, sometimes the players go out of character and talk mechanics, talk decisions. I'm not gonna. I don't want to knock Critical Role, but why I don't personally watch it is because very often they do break their characters and plan the fights, and we don't. If Jane does something that screws my character over, I'm not learning that out of character. I'm learning that in the moment, where I then have to be, now I have to re-strategize and come up with a different plan of action. People sitting around a table with a table map or whatever apparatus set up, you get that more casual playing D&D, not telling a story sense. Yeah. I will say Critical Role gets away with it, as Sass said, because they're trained professional voice actors who are very good at roleplay when they do. So, they can get away with not necessarily having 2 paragraphs written by the mods about what the story so far is. I mean, because the fans keep up with it, and that's more power to them. I mean, that's fantastic. But, yeah.
And I think that was the thing is, we decided early on, if you've watched anybody else playing D&D, or if you've played D&D, there's generally 2 ways. There is the third person way, and there's the first person way. So you'll have people in the third person say, my character does this, or Radovan does this, or Keeliana does this. From day one, I was like, there is no third person, there is only first person on our show. You are your character all the time. Therefore, a combat round is 6 seconds. You do not get 5 minutes prior to the 6 seconds to start to meta game a plan. Your characters are you must act as them, and you must flow. We give a little bit of leeway, because you kind of have to, because 6 minutes you cannot possibly have 4 or 5 people commit an entire action in 6 seconds, right? It doesn't work. Seconds, not minutes, sorry. But for the most part, there is no pre-planning. The players, if they're going to plan a fight, they have to do it in character prior to the actual fight. Once the fight starts, they can't be like, oh, in the next round, I want your character to do this so I can do that, and then you do this. And if they do that, there's only 2 ways that happens. Either A, all the characters are telepathic and they talk to each other with telepathy, which we've never had. Or their character is shouting it out in the combat. Cyrano, duck underneath this guy and I'll push him over and trip him up. And the orc's like, oh, is that what you're going to do? And I won't go there then. Like, you know, so
No.
if you're communicating it from character to character, the enemies, if they understand you, hear you too. So it changes the combat dynamic. It changes the roleplay dynamic. And again, that's not saying that one way is right, one way is wrong. That's just our way. And everything we're talking about right now is just, from our standpoint, why we do what we do, the reasons behind it, how we do it, and why we see it as important. It is not in any way to say anybody that does not do it this way is wrong, because every way is right, right? We're not going to be part of the whole your fun is wrong crowd.
It's very easy for people to misconstrue what we're saying as the criticism, or, you know, you're wrong, we're right. Because Gore's right. We're not doing that at all. I mean, we learned from the first stream, Gore used to roll dice, some of his dice hidden. I mean, you know, we roll it on the table. And one of the benefits of that was we heard a dice being rolled and we're like, oh shit, what's that mean? Oh no. But at the other time, it's like, well, chat doesn't get to see what's being rolled. So from then on, all dice were rolled openly. And that was also to show that nothing was being fudged or, you know, anything. It was all out in the open. But also it was, you could see the game in play and motion and the mechanics at work, which we didn't stress or emphasize, but it was nice they could have a pocket where it could be shown or demonstrated. You know, I mean, trying to make a little concession here, a little benefit there. I mean, it was all a learning curve for the first two campaigns. We really were finding out what worked, what didn't. An example of what didn't work is sometimes when we were going to the tavern for the night, sometimes the characters would roleplay, and that roleplay would be good, but not move the story forward. And, you know, after a while, Gore would, you know, we would kind of have it in mind that maybe we were lagging too much. Chat was losing interest because we weren't progressing enough. So we paced better. You know,
I mean, we in the early days, bear in mind,
you know,
when we were one of the first streams, our viewerships were huge. And, you know, before we kind of go too far along, as we mentioned, you know, there are partnered streams, and then there are affiliated streams. Back then, there was only partnered. Everybody could stream, but if you wanted a sub button, if you wanted to make revenue and you wanted to have emotes, you had to get partnered. That was an incredibly difficult thing to achieve. It was very, very hard. You had to have an insane number of viewers, you had to have an insane amount of content, longevity, this, that, and the other. We achieved it in 4 months. And the reason we did that was because of you people, because our viewer to follower ratio in Twitch's words when they sent us back the acceptance letter was, "This is unheard of." One of the misconceptions when you stream is you want followers. You don't want followers. Followers are nothing more than someone that said, "Notify me when you go live." If you have 20,000 followers and only 50 show up when you go live, that's not good. That's bad. What you want is a smaller number of followers, but most of them show up. At the time, we had a couple of thousand followers, if that, and we had like 70% of them would show up when we went live and stay for a 3-hour session. And we applied for partnership on a blind chance, thinking this is a joke, we're never going to get accepted, we're too new. And we did. They were like, yes, we've looked at your stats, we've looked at your content, this is new, this is fresh. No one has a viewer to follower ratio like this typically, and we got partnered. Then Critical Role happened, and when Critical Role happened, 2 things occurred. One, it brought an awful lot more people to the hobby to watch D&D. What it also did is convince everybody that they needed to stream their D&D games, so consequently there become thousands of D&D streams out there. And, you know, it diluted the audience a large amount, which kind of changed the dynamics a little bit. But kind of, you know, before we kind of go any further with that, one of the things that, as I said, we decided early on was story first. We're going to use D&D to tell a story, not play D&D. We've mentioned that. But the learning curve, one of the first things for what Shaggett's point was, we had a lot of content that we'd sit there and I'd look at the viewer numbers and I'd watch the viewers start to drop. So I'd send the players a private message and be like, okay, this isn't good content. We need to move this. And it would usually be after we'd spent 30 to 45 minutes discussing the what, whens, and wheres and buying stuff in a store.
Going shopping, spending time ordering beers and drinking at night after a day's adventure when we had a plan of action for the following day, but we weren't getting to it.
Yep.
There was a lot of those kind of moments that we as players needed. We kind of learned what was good content, what worked, what didn't. One of our biggest problems, which we still sometimes fall into, is planning. We're like, we're going to plan. We're going to turn this house into a death house for any intruders. We're going to put this trap here and that trap there. And, that's all well and good. But after a while, it's like, okay, let's get the plan in motion, please. Let's get something happening. Or arguing. We would argue as our characters. I want to do option A. I want to do option B. I'm not moving. What are we doing?
It's like
round and round, logically falling into a pit.
So what we did in those instances was we learned to come up with some key phrases. So, for example, we used to encourage the players to have some meaningful roleplay and not roll dice, because that's what we're here for, roleplay. No. I've always said it, anytime a DM can sit back and do nothing for 30 minutes and let the players talk amongst themselves, that's great. That's what you want.
Yeah.
But there were times when that would happen and it was very poignant, so it was fantastic content. Chat loved it, they ate it up. I'd sit back and enjoy it. The players enjoyed it. There were other times when it just, as Shaggett said, kind of become counterintuitive because they were just talking for the sake of talking.
We were dawdling, right?
Yeah. So what we did is I would start saying, okay, are your characters ready to turn in for the night, or do you still have some business to attend to? That was me dropping the thing on the table to say, what comes next either has to be relevant or go to bed and we move on till tomorrow. And everybody kind of learned that and realized that that worked for us.
Yeah.
So there would be times when Shagget might say, or Jane might say, okay, but before I turn in, I'm going by Radovan's room. And I would be, that's fine, because this means there is some poignant content coming. So that was cool. But if there wasn't any, they'd be like, nope, we turn in.
Yeah.
You wake up in the morning and story moves.
This is the kind of thing that's very different if you were to play D&D with your friends around a table at a house, right? Because it moves at the pace that you want. We are constantly aware that people are watching us. Like, it's not just the cast, it's you guys. And we want you to make the most of your time as possible. And we as players had to learn what worked and what didn't for that purpose. Like, what was good role play and what was fine art role play, but not really important or necessary to the story being told. I mean, Gorbad never said to us, stop doing this now, you're boring the hell out of this kind of chat. He never said that. But he did let us know, kind of like, yeah, is this really relevant to what we are trying to achieve here as a show? Because we are a show. I mean, that's why we're on Twitch. Like, we're trying to entertain. And some of what we did was not entertaining. Me going to an elf shop saying, I want a new bow, and spending a half hour purchasing and haggling with a price. It's like, come on, guys, that's not good content. I mean, that's stuff that around a table would be fine. Because while that was happening, some other player could be on their phone or go to the bathroom, I mean, whatever works for that table, of course.
Which
that brings different for us.
Yeah, that's a good segue into one of the other things is camera presence. We discussed early on, there will be no eating on stream because you don't want to sit there and listen to us smack our chops and stuff our faces. We also said no phones. You are engaged. You get yourself in a good place where you can stream. No distractions. No background noises. Take it seriously. Take your role almost. You're basically, this is amateur dramatics, right? You're going to take the role seriously. Have a good camera presence. Make sure you have a viable place to do it. But with that also comes the fact that there's the very real thing that that there are a bunch of people watching you do what you do. And when you act like an idiot, there are people watching you act like an idiot. And when you're putting on silly voices, there are people watching you put on silly voices. Or when one of your viewers, sends you a bunch of wigs and you start wearing female wigs to do female characters, which I need to pull those back out. There were times when we are very self-conscious about certain things, but you had to get over it. You had to forget that anyone's watching. So, the camera presence and thing, and as Shagget said, kind of trying to make sure that you're poignant with content so that it doesn't get away from chat. For me as a DM, I also had to learn that what was fun around a physical tabletop with nobody watching was not necessarily fun on a virtual tabletop with an audience. In some of the early days, I used to do puzzles. Complex, fun puzzles. Only to realize after a few of those, this is not fun for the players. It is not fun for the players to sit there struggling to solve a puzzle while people watch them fail. It's frustrating, it's uncomfortable, it's awkward. And then when someone in chat figures it out and they're like, oh, I figured this out ages ago. And human nature is, they want to tell us. They want to say, oh, here's the answer. Look at me, I'm smart. I figured it out. But they can't because they're not going to do the spoilers. But then our players are like, great. So people in chat have figured it out, and we're still here trying to solve this. It just wasn't fun for them.
Yeah.
So we moved away from that. We said, this doesn't work for stream. If there is a puzzle, it has to be incredibly easy, incredibly simple, and it needs to be over and done or bypassable within 5 minutes. Otherwise, we don't keep doing it.
I mean, also, chat, remember, it's a simple, easy puzzle might come across to you guys. It's like, oh, this is like child's play. But to the player, we have so much other things in mind, character, where they are in the story, their emotions, and their state of mind, their intelligence level as opposed to your intelligence. I mean, of course, you can kind of argue puzzles are for the players less than the characters. But it's a different thing when you feel the pressure of even 30 people watching you. Me sitting there like, well, if I say the sentence with the starting letter of this, then he'll answer, but this person won't answer. I mean, I feel stupid, and I know that I'm not stupid. There was a puzzle that the most recent puzzle in Howard Roll was Satchmo's puzzle. And what Satchmo did and what we decided to do was only spend a little bit of on-air time trying to solve it, with the consensus being we would do it off stream. We would try to figure it out off without it being shown, so that we would not eat into all the time on a session trying to work a puzzle out. And it wasn't an easy puzzle, and we got it in a roundabout, possibly wrong way, but we got the right answer in the end. But we spent a couple of weeks between the sessions, off stream working it out, talking to each other.
And it was not an easy puzzle. It was very complicated, and it took us a long time to kind of even grasp the concept of how to solve the problem.
Yes, right.
To the point, whereas if we'd have done it on stream, that's all you would have seen was us sitting there moving little gem tokens around. No, that doesn't go there. Well, this one's that. That's not good content. And even if it is good content to some of you, it's not fun,
right,
to be the one being watched failing. So again, that was one of the other big differences that we found. Other differences were you can't just get up and walk away from the camera when it's not your turn.
Mm-hmm.
You can't,
or you're within a box, so you can't gesture the way.
Yeah, you've got a limited field of vision. I like to get really animated and it's hard when you have to sit here. Shagget has played virtually around a physical table with me. We've played Warhammer, and what I actually did was set up a monitor at one end of my dining table, a monitor, and Shagget was on the monitor, and we had a camera set up so he could see the table and everybody else, and he was part of our real table.
It was weird, but I enjoyed it. But it was weird to have.
As he can contest around a table, I don't sit still. I'm up, I'm down, I'm all over the place. I'm so animated. It was a very hard thing for me to reel that in and confine myself to the little box, because I like to get up and get very passionate into it, and I like to use body language as much as voices and all this stuff, and you just can't do that on here.
Another thing from a player perspective is we're all at different time zones, different locations. Also, we all have different comfort levels of activity, but we also don't want to steal each other's spotlight. And I think at a table, it would be a different feeling of hogging the time, right? Whereas, the first campaign, my character was charismatic and the face of the party. Jane and Bane's characters were a little bit more reserved and shy. And often at the end of those sessions, I felt like I had taken up too much time with my character being the diplomatic character, which made sense for the story. But at the same time, I was like, is Jane and Bane feeling like shunted aside? So I would constantly have to go to them and be like, are you okay? Are you enjoying yourselves? Please tell me I'm not capitalizing on, this situation. Please speak up. And you definitely have a new awareness of the other castmates. You don't want to steal time, hog time, be the hero, like the only character who could solve every problem. Because one of the best things I loved about Matt joining is he was like, yeah, I'll do it. He just would. And I'd be like, yay, I get to sit back and relax, not be that face of the party kind of deal.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, and it's like there are different challenges as a player on a virtual tabletop on a stream, and there are different challenges as a DM. So, being that you've played kind of sort of in person around my table, and you've played, a measly 8 years on How We Roll. Mm-hmm. What are some of the biggest differences that you find as a player on a stream? Like, what would you feel you adjust the most? And you probably already touched on some of this, but kind of to be poignant, some of the things. What are the main things that you find you have to do differently as a player on a live stream D&D show versus playing a game of D&D around a table?
Managing and being on top of your microphone, right? What's going out there in the streamiverse. Oftentimes we start talking and we're muted and we don't realize we're muted. I imagine at a table that's not a problem because you just talk and everyone can hear you.
Appreciate that resub, my friend. Much love.
Yes, thank you, Jocks. I think that's a big one. Like learning the transitions that Gorbad does. Sometimes he would play sounds that only chat could hear because it wasn't going through Roll20. And often we don't have our stream up, and if it is up, which is rarely, is muted. So a lot of those cues, you kind of have to learn the social cues, like when can you talk, when should you mute? If you are muted, to remember to unmute yourself. All those kinds of things don't exist at the table, right? Because you're all in one room together and it all is happening together. It's very disjointed and separate on a stream because Gore can be playing the Kevin sound right now and I don't know it. So I might be talking and it can be blasting in your ears and you guys could start laughing and I'll be none the wiser. But you kind of learn as you go, oh, this is when this transition happens. Or when we go live, yes, we are not there to see the transition from the starting soon screen to when Gorbad starts, when we're all on camera. Like, we don't see when we're on camera. But we can kind of glean it when Gore starts his talking. I mean, that makes sense. Like, obviously, those kind of cues. There's a lot of those kind of micro adjustments you have to do when you're streaming D&D, which really break it. The flow is different. It really is. So when I did it when I was the only person on the screen at the table with you guys, Gore, I could see it was a completely different feel, and the flow was very different, and the breaks were different. We try to have scheduled breaks. We don't always do it on the stream, but it just felt different, and it was an adjustment in that way. But also, I was also still on a screen, and I was the only one on the screen, so it was not quite at a table feel. I felt because sometimes I talk and the mic would clip, or I wouldn't be heard, and then I was like, well, should I talk? How well can they hear me? But also the party got split more, I think, around the table, right? Because Bailey and Nat did their own things, and the men did their own thing. Like, don't split the party. I think that's true generally, but I think on a stream it's even worse, right? Like, because then half the people aren't even be involved, and there's people watching them not be involved. So then, of course, you have to be conscious not to be on your phone or eating. You have to be engaged even if you're not involved, right? You have to show that you're listening and you know what's happening.
Yeah, I think that was, that's a good point, is like, if the party splits around a real table, real life table, you're basically, okay, I'm going to devote some time to you. Now I'm going to devote some time to you. Now time to you. Now time to you. And when that time is not going on, they can get up, go to the fridge, get a Coke, check their phone, do these things. It doesn't interfere with anybody. On this, we have to be very aware, if the party is split, some of the people on camera are not doing anything. The focus is no longer on them. So we do try to minimize that, and I try to be very short with, okay, going back to you. Okay, now while they're doing that, what are you doing? And I try to do that fairly quickly so that there's not too long. And it has to happen. The very nature of the game, that is going to happen. Not all the characters are going to be stuck in one little bundle the entire time. But we try to make it, when it does happen, short little exposures of time versus, okay, well, I'm going to talk about, we're going to do what you want for 20 minutes. Now we're going to go what you want for 20 minutes. We have had that experience on the show. Didn't work. It was frustrating. So it was, that's one of the things. I think for me, from a DM standpoint, it is acknowledging, and I'm not going to go off on the tangent. There is another topic we're going to talk about on one of the Dialogues and Dice about D&D terminology and how a lot of it is misconstrued these days, and how it has strangely been altered because of people using terminology incorrectly, and then the masses have done it incorrectly, therefore it's changed what it technically means. But it's one of the things I want to talk about is the difference between railroading and structure. One of the things that we have to do on D&D, or how we roll, is we must maintain structure. What that means is the player agency is that when they determine this is the course of action our characters are going to take, that they acknowledge that they are to some large degree obligated to follow through with that. The reason for that is, in order for me to be able to have maps for everything and not be overwhelmed with work by trying to come up with a map for every possible contingency, they give me a gist of, this is what we're going to do. So, in some ways, it could almost look a little railroady, like, well, if Gorbad's already pre-planned all the maps, then obviously the players are being railroaded. That's not what happens. What happens is, they do stuff, they tell me what's going on, I create maps to fit what they're about to do. That's how we do it. The problem would only be an issue if, right at the start of the stream, they go, I know we said we were going to open up that trapdoor and go down into this dungeon, but we've decided we want to go down this road into the forest and go to the mountains instead. Around a virtual tabletop, where there are no requirements, around a physical tabletop where there's no requirements, I can have what I call a true sandbox session. I prep nothing, I plan nothing, I improv everything, and the players can do whatever the hell they want when they want it, doesn't matter. For a show, we can't do that. not and have the maps. We can do it if we don't have maps. But if we're going to give you visuals, we have to have some structure. So that's another difference for me as a DM is I have to make sure that things are somewhat structured. I have to have a good understanding of what is possible during a session. And know, based on what my players have already indicated, that these are the things that they're going to explore on this session, therefore I can have these maps ready to roll. As opposed to getting thrown a huge curveball.
We've gotten better, more subtle with those kinds of like intentions.
Yeah.
I think back in the day, Gore would literally end the show saying, "And so what are you going to do now?" And then we'd say, and he'd be like, "Well, tune in next week." But then he learned the importance and coolness of cliffhangers, which didn't necessarily have that. But we as players kind of internalized, let's always say what we intend to do, what our plan of action is. So there's always a momentum of movement, and hopefully it's in the right direction, because as players, we do not know what we're doing is right or wrong, actually, or what's going to happen. We're surprised constantly. I do know that there were a few YouTube comments way back when where people are like, "Oh, this is all scripted." And it's like, yeah, because not that it is scripted, but we are making it so Gore has the next session planned and ready based on what we intend to do.
In a weird way, it was almost a compliment, because they were like, obviously the players are running from a script and they're doing everything all of this is pre-planned, predetermined, pre-scripted. We were like, well, it couldn't be farther from the truth, but the fact that it comes across that way, that's kind of a compliment.
Really cool.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, believe us, we don't have time for that crap. We don't have time to plan that much ahead. We don't write a script for the next 3 hours. So, but that is the thing but we do have to have that player agency. If we didn't have the quantity of visuals that we use. So before we kind of wrap this up and move on, one of the other things I want to talk about is atmosphere and tension. So I use a lot of atmospherics. I use musical tracks where appropriate. I use sound effects where appropriate. I cannot stand dead air. I don't think it makes for a good stream. I don't think you need to see or hear silence. Just by adding a little bit of audio, a little bit of audio effects, a little bit of background music, it really helps bring just like any good movie. What makes a movie? Part of what makes a movie is the score. Mm-hmm. With no score, a movie, if you've ever watched a movie without the score, it's really dry. Doesn't matter how good the movie is, it's dry. So we utilize, sound effects and a score to help elevate it. But going back to when we decided all dice rolls should be visible. And this is a big difference between us and a lot of streams. Every single dice roll that I make is seen by you guys. They're rolled around a real tabletop when you're behind the DM screen. It is not at all uncommon or even frowned upon for a DM to fudge dice rolls for the sake of the story. Oh, that goblin just rolled a natural 20 and it's going to kill the level 2 warrior. That's not good for the story. Oh, he only hit you for 2. Because otherwise, right? That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. And I adopt that method in some of the games I play around a tabletop. But we found that chat really got out of their seats and losing their mind in those life and death situations when they knew the dice roll really will determine the outcome of this character's fate. There are several moments that have stuck out. We have had comments from you guys about how much you enjoy the tension and the level of the reality and the grit, because without risk, there is no great reward. You can't have a true stand up and cheer moment if you're never really at risk. So from day one, while we are story centric, we also said we will allow players to lose their characters. Characters are allowed to die on these shows. Hence the original concept of the name, HOW Reroll. As in, you might have to re-roll your character on this. You may have to come up, and it's happened several times. But just thinking back, some of the moments I can remember. Jay Nirvana in the acid bath.
Yes. Oh, that's so
and
good.
Bane having basically one round to determine what she could do to save Jane's life. Radovan being infected with mummy rot and only having one shot to save himself and needing to roll two.
Two shots. Yeah.
Failed the first one and had to roll a 16 or higher, I believe, on a D20 to survive.
Yeah, like D20.
That was a hell of a cliffhanger. Yeah. He knew, and chat knew, when he rolled that D20, if it was not 16 or over, he is done. He is dead. There is no artificial saving him. There is no screen to keep him alive. I'm not going to fudge this dice roll in his favor. Yeah. To quote Ivan Drago, if he dies, he dies. When Veslar was fighting the Shadow blow for blow down in that dungeon at the base of that ruined castle, either one of them was one hit from Veslar. One hit was going to take him out. One hit would have killed the Shadow, and it was miss. And chat was losing their mind because it's like every time one of us went to roll, the tension went through the roof. And it was he'd roll and miss, and they'd be, oh my god, no, the Shadow's going to get another chance to kill him. And then the Shadow would roll, oh my god, he missed! And everyone would be losing their friggin' mind, cheering at the screen. And, we had people sending us video clips and screenshots of them losing their shit in front of their monitor at these moments.
Oh, I would love to get a montage of those.
Oh man, I know, right? I don't know that we've ever really saved them all.
Yeah, I know. Would be so good.
But honestly, the physical rolling of the dice doesn't change my aspect of anything Beta Dragon, the way I do stuff. Physically rolling the dice might have put me in a more creative mindset. It really doesn't. What it did was it created a lot of dilemmas for me. Because I knew chat didn't see them. So I was able to artificially create moments, but they were artificial, is the whole point. Because whatever I rolled, nobody else knew what it was.
And also, it was short-lived, right? Because after a while, the players, and just from my perspective, got quite used to hearing the clattering of the dice on Gorbaz's desk. Like, oh, he could just be psyching us out. And, it lost kind of that luster. Like, not every time he rolled was a thing actually happening. He was just doing it to do it.
That's it.
And we kind of caught wise to it. So the transition to showing all the dice rolls just was better all around, actually.
Well, yeah, it worked better for us. At one point I did toy with having a camera over a dice tray and rolling the dice, but then you run into the delay aspect of the stream. And then you also, it's one more thing to keep up with and a third camera to have to keep and maintain, and it was just too many issues. I totally get it. Rolling dice is fun. It's something that people really enjoy. And there is something more realistic and more fun about actually rolling your dice, as opposed to pressing a button and a macro do it for you. I just think that the benefits for us outweighed the cons in the end. And again, being able to see all of my dice rolls makes it way more visible and more entertaining and following, I think, for chat. On the whole, everybody's, you're never going to please everybody, right? No matter what you do. But that was one of the things early on. When we did transition, we kind of polled a lot of people and said, look, do you prefer it this way or the other way? And it was pretty overwhelming that people wanted to see the dice rolls. So, we kind of gave into the peer pressure. But again, with those dice rolls being open, that level of tension was achievable. Yeah, I mean, other than that, the overlays are important. A good graphical overlay that allows people to kind of watch in a comfortable environment, have something thematic. You know, all the different parts that we utilize. For example, like here on this show, you know, we have shutters. So that if a player needs to go AFK, we can shutter it and not have them awkwardly getting up and moving away from their seat or having to take care of something and everybody watching them do it. Just little things like that that all kind of transitioned over time to make us realize these are good things to help us do what we do.
Beta, I think what you're talking about has more to do, Gorbat talked about this a long time ago, about how he came to see damage in fights differently with the hit points. Because, you know, having 100 hit points, taking 10 damage, like the wounds described and how a lot of DMs would describe like a 2-hit point as like, oh, you got cut, you know, like a scrape. And that might come into what you're talking about, because you're talking kind of like combat-y based, right? Like,
yeah, I think he's talking about I used to maybe be a bit more descriptive in the actual combat itself. And there may be some truth to that. I may have gotten a little bit away from that. It's not, however, due to the dice. It is due to becoming too repetitive. After 8 years, there's only so many ways you can describe how something happens. So I've tended to concentrate more on the descriptives when it's more relevant than on every single blow. For example, swings wildly. I used to say that so much that it became a meme. And I was like, I say that way too much. I need to curb that. That's becoming monotonous and annoying, right?
You still say it every once in a while, and people do hashtags with it.
So it's things like that, you know. But yeah, swings wildly drinking games would not go well. Every time Gorbat says swings wildly, do a shot, right?
I mean, especially since we were playing level 1, level 2, level 3 characters when that was said the most. And of course, you missed a lot of the time because your modifiers were crap. Your base attack bonus is really bad. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, without going off on another tangent, yeah, like listening to DM Jake say massive in the early new crits, exactly right, yeah. I mean, we all have them. And I tried over time to get away from having a cliche thing that I said. But when you're trying so hard not to say certain things, you probably do tend to pull away from some of that. But one of the, you know, kind of what you touched on, again, we're going to kind of really cover this in another episode. But, you know, like what is hit points? And how do hit points work? And hit points are not damage. Hit points are not wounds. They never were and never intended to be, but a lot of people think, because of video games and stuff like that, that's how they are. The classic description that I remember is hit points are a pool of ability that you have to avoid the fatal blow. That's it. The more hit points you have, doesn't mean you can... It's like if you think of a level 1 warrior and a level 10 warrior. If I stab a level 1 warrior through the neck with a sword, or a level 10 warrior through the neck with a sword, they are both going to die. But if my sword is only capable of doing D10 plus 2 hit points, and one of them has 10 hit points and one of them has 120, it's not possible for me to kill this one with that blow. So how does the damage translate? Why is D10 plus 2 damage to this guy virtually fatal, and it's nothing but a scratch to this guy? Well, the concept, again, comes back to, it's not the blow. It is, you either ducked it, you dodged it, you partially parried it, maybe you got a little bloodied, so sometimes it's okay to describe a scratch or a cut or a nick. But if every single blow that you took was an actual wound, you'd be a mass of walking scars, right?
And D&D doesn't do this well as a design in the game, because magic, I fireball you for 86 damage.
How are you alive?
You take 16 damage because you successfully reflex saved. The fireball was all around you. Where did you go for cover? Like, how does that mechanically, realistically
so
work?
The concept of that is like, if you successfully saved, you threw yourself aside or to the ground, and you avoided the explosive aspect, and you got a little bit singed, a little bit hot around the edge. And again, as you're losing hit points, you're just getting more fatigued. But then 5e muddled that whole concept by having fatigue levels. And exhaustion levels, rather. Yeah. So it's like, well, that now changes that concept. But that was the original the original idea all the way through. Is it's the ability to avoid the fatal blow. It is why in early editions of D&D, I don't know if any of you really remember back, but there was the assassin, and he had a table. And if he successfully got into a position to make a strike on you that you did not know was coming, he didn't roll damage. He rolled a percentage dice on a table, and he cross-referenced his assassin level with your character level. And if he rolled below that percentage, you were dead. That's it. You are dead. Because you had no chance to avoid the fatal blow, was the concept. Now, people didn't like that.
Of course not.
It's the same as why we have D&D rules that say, even if you're asleep, someone cannot come and cut your throat.
Right.
That's the game aspect. That is it realistic? No. But is it necessary to make a game? Yes.
Yeah, because people would be pissed if that's how their 18th level character, got murked by a dagger in the dark. Like, before we move on, someone in chat did talk about our extra content, our music videos and the like. Obviously, that is definitely something that's because we're streaming it for an audience. This is obviously not something we would have the parody music videos, the No Dice, No Glory vid that Gore did initially with Jane when Jane visited Louisiana for that vacation or whatever. All that stuff, we don't have a crew behind us. You know, it is just the 8 of us all told, all the cast members, you know, from Monday and Thursday show. You know, we just use our separate talents to do that, and we do that to get the laugh out of each other. You know, the Blame It on the Dice song that Gorbat did was a total surprise to the cast. And
that was the first time we ever did anything like that. And it wasn't, no one knew I was going to do it until I did it.
And it was specifically because he wanted to get our reaction. I mean, and the chat's reaction. I mean, it was because he had that Halloween episode planned, that separate but equally awesome story. That would never happen around a regular table, I think, you know, right? But it is really hard to do because we not only are doing all the work we're putting into this, Gore especially, but we have our lives to do, and people are in different levels in terms of how much they can engage. So sometimes it is a little bit of like arm wrangling, like, please, Jane, finish this or do this. Please, Matt, mix this, please.
And also, everybody collectively is way more busy in real life than they were when we first started, too.
That is true.
Jane used to be part-time back then. Now she has a very real big person job working for a very real big person company that is a lot of demands on her time. I'm the same. So there are some changes. Matt's the same. It's why you never see Matt other than on Monday, because all he can ever carve out as a realtor, he spends a lot of evenings at work. If somebody calls and says, I want to see a house on this day, he can't be saying, oh, well, I can only show it to you on Wednesdays or Tuesdays. So what he does, in order to be able to do this, he accepts Mondays, I will not do these things. No. But that is his only day that he can guarantee to not have stream. That's why you never see him on a Thursday show.
He was on a Thursday show.
At one point, but it was too much for him.
It was too much.
Yeah. So...
Also, we decided to split the weeks, and that had a bit. I mean, that's like I think the last thing we can really talk about before we go into the next segment, because that was a decision made where we as a cast decided, let's showcase other systems, right? The Star Wars, the Call of Cthulhu, the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Paranoia, because there are a lot of different ways people can do tabletop that maybe you guys aren't always familiar with.
Right.
But it also allowed us so Gore wouldn't have to work on just one story.
It was done to help out with some burnout, so we didn't burn out on D&D alone,
right?
By having a break from it. And also on Thursdays, it was kind of decided that it wouldn't be quite so map intensive.
Yeah.
I would be a little bit more theater of the mind when I needed to be, and just use a static map a little bit more, so it wasn't as much work.
Beta. The reason why we got the larger cast was for that very reason. Is because people could only really start devoting one. You know, that was one of the reasons why we said, let's get new players. And then we got Nat and Satch and Casey. I mean, you know, they had been on Mondays as well, but it did help with the burnout. The downside is it also made the campaigns last a much longer. You know, so burnout comes in two forms, right? Because when we were running two times a week, we would get burned out from D&D specifically, but also our characters. Like, I love playing Radovan, but after a while, I'm like, I want to try something different. And now it's only once on Monday, so if it lasts a long time, because it lasts twice as long now, you know, you're in that character for longer.
Yep.
So we're like, well, let's shorten those campaigns, right?
And that was it, because originally we were running about 2 campaigns a year, 1 campaign twice a week, lasted about 6 months, and was averaging 40 to 50-ish episodes.
Right.
Then we dropped to 1, and initially was still averaging 40 to 50 episodes, and we were like, wait a second, this campaign's been going on for over a year.
I mean, Echoes of Alderseed lasted 2 years.
Almost,
because of missed stuff.
A lot of missed episodes, yeah. So when we went back and did the more recent D&D campaigns while we were doing them, we cut this, you know, like the last D&D campaign that we just finished, we kept that down to about half that number of episodes. So it was only closer to 6 months.
Right.
Which I think is good. This one, on the other hand, being that it is Curse of Strahd, is going to be a marathon.
It's going to be a long one, yeah.
But it's going to be worth it. But yeah, so you know, there's a lot of reasons why we kind of switched up and had a second game going. You know, like you said, we basically had a larger pool of people and said, okay, who wants to play Thursday? Who wants to play Monday? Who wants to do this? Who wants to do that? And that's kind of what we did. And as always, I mean, most of the time when we are getting players, a lot of the time they come from, they're you guys, you know. They start watching us, they end up in a few one-shots at some point, and then ultimately at some point down the road, if we're in that position, we can try, you know, sometimes we have, whenever Bane had to stop streaming, we had a void to fill. We filled it in a short term, briefly, but realized that wasn't going to. But we knew going in that this was not a permanent fill. This is a 1 campaign filler, and then after that one, we went on and found other people and stuff like that, and that may well happen again in the future. You know, So,
I mean, Satchmo is the most famous example of a viewer who became a cast member.
Yep.
Because Satch started watching us.
Yeah, he was always here, and he had the time and was available. You know, we've talked to Sass a couple of times. The problem is, again, Sass has a very real work schedule that has awkwardness and makes it hard for her to be able to commit to certain things. So, you know, but we have had Sass on the show numerous times, and she has played in one-shots with us a bunch. So there you go. So yeah, that's kind of where, you know, that's our history of why we got into doing it, how we got into it, how we physically do it, why we do it the way we are. Some of the things, if you decide you want to get into D&D streaming, things that you can consider, how you want to do them, why you might want to do them a certain way. As you can see, Twitch is not the only place that people stream D&D. Some people stream directly to YouTube. Some people are streaming it directly to Facebook. If it's a multimedia platform that you can stream live to, there are people doing D&D. So there you go. But Entives, we digress, and we're going to move on to our next topic tonight, which is brought to you by Dead Kid 55. He gave me a 2-line email that said, "I've always wanted to see a monster like this." So we said, okay, we'll make a monster like this. So we're going to move on with our next segment.
Monster Mayhem.
Alrighty, Monster Mayhem. So, can you go ahead and read, if you can do so for me, go ahead and read what his question was, Shaggy.
Oh, yes, let me pull that up, sorry. Did you put it on the thing, or was an email, right?
It's in the email, yeah. Okay.
Hello, the monster I have been pondering on for a while is a giant pumpkin that reanimates corpses and can animate other pumpkins. It also could have a fire breath weapon. Have a great day, evening, night. Also, I would love to hear your opinion on it. Sorry I don't have stats or anything. That was Dead Kid.
Alrighty, so I give to you the Jackomancer. So we're going to kind of go through this little sheet here, and so the little tag up the top here, it rose from the ground slowly and deliberately. At first it was just a fiendish jack-o'-lantern, but soon we could see a full torso, arms and legs, then its gourd-like head filled with flames. So what is the Jackomancer? Well, it's a carved jack-o'-lantern sitting upon the earthy ground, suddenly begins to move as it rises out of the ground to reveal the torso, long gangly arms and legs. It's approximately 7 foot tall, humanoid, and was and has what appears to be a carved pumpkin for a head. Its elongated arms end with long, twisted talons, and there is an eerie green glow emanating from the head. Some of the things that are relevant to it: seasonal manifestation. The Jackomancer can manifest itself in any carved pumpkin head on All Hallows Eve. It can also be summoned forth by the utterance of a dark incantation known to very few. Those that summon the Jackomancer usually do so to enact a terrible revenge on one who has deeply scorned them. Spreading the seed. The Jackomancer can create animated, floating jack-o'-lanterns simply by passing within 60 feet of a carved pumpkin. These animated jack-o'-lanterns fly towards the closest living creature, or as directed by the Jackomancer, and explode, dealing 3d6 fire damage to all in a 20-foot radius. The Jackomancer can also raise any corpse to become a zombie by touch. So let's look at the stats. It's a medium undead, chaotic evil, has natural AC of 16, 8d8 plus 24 with an average of 60 hit points. It can move 30 feet, but it can also burrow underground 20 feet. Mediocre strength of 14, dex of 12, constitution of 16, intelligence 12, wisdom 12, charisma 10, and it has con and wisdom saves of 6 and 4. And of course, being undead, it has certain resistances. It has damage resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. It is immune to fire and necrotic damage. It cannot be blinded, exhausted, frightened, or paralyzed. It has blind sight, 60 feet, dark vision, 40 feet, a passive perception of 11, and it does not speak any languages. Challenge rating is 5. So, special abilities, it has Animate Jack-O-Lantern. As a free action, the Jackomancer can animate any carved pumpkin or Jack-O-Lantern simply by passing within 60 feet of it. The animated Jack-O-Lantern can fly with a movement rate of 30 feet, will move towards any living creature, or at the direction of the Jackomancer. On impact with its target, it explodes, causing, it should be 3d6 fire damage, I just noticed a typo, but I'll fix that, within 20 feet. Raise Zombie. As an action, the Jackomancer can touch any dead creature and animate it as a zombie. See the Monster Manual, page 316 for that. It has multiple attacks, allowing it to attack twice with its claws. Its claws are melee weapon attacks +6 to hit, 5-foot range. Single attack or single target, one creature on a hit, it does D10 +2 damage. It also has Breathe Fire, ranged weapon attack +6 to hit, range 30 feet. Area of effect is a 20-foot cone, and it does 3d6 +6 fire damage. On a successful DC 14 reflex save, the damage is reduced to half. And as it says right here, idea by DeadKid55.
So when Gore sent me that he did this today, he was like, so I have the monster for the Monster Mayhem. It's called the Jackoff-mancer. The Jackoff-mancer. And then he corrected himself and said, no,
well, it does have spreading the seed.
Yeah, spreading the seed. Thanks, Gore.
But yeah, so there's another little monster, and as always, I will put it in the Discord for you guys to download and use at your discretion if you want. I
have a question.
Yeah.
How easy and or hard is it? And I know challenge rating in 5th edition is different and sometimes not fully accurate. Is it for you to come up with a challenge rating for these creatures when you stat it out?
Honestly, not very difficult because, as you said, first of all, challenge rating is fairly bogus in 5e
right.
and not very accurate. But what I do is I generally just look at other monsters and consider its ability compared to theirs, the difficulty, and then I stat stuff, or I give it a challenge rating that fits what those things around it fit.
Sure.
So, I'll look at hit points, I'll look at damage output, I'll look at special abilities, I'll look at resistances, and then find existing stuff that feels about the same, look at that challenge rating, and then I base it on that.
Then you base it on that, okay.
I mean, if you just took it from the hit points and the damage output that it has, it probably would be closer to a challenge rating 4, maybe even a 3. But because the concept is that this monster will be around when there are jack-o'-lanterns that it can fling at the party and basically have little mini firebolts all over the place, and it can raise things, that's what makes it worthy of a challenge rating 5.
Cool.
So, if you was to bring this onto the table or into your game without the jack-o'-lanterns or anything to raise dead, a level 5 party would massacre this in 2 rounds.
Yeah.
But you add those elements and use it the way you're meant to, and that's when it becomes a challenge rating.
That's when it becomes appropriate for the level.
Yep,
yeah.
That's it.
Also, chat guys, submit more emails with topics that you want us to talk about and ideas for monsters so Gore can stat them and we can make them.
Right here. There's the email
address.
Really,
because as you can see from the last 2.0 Dialogues and Dice we did exactly that. The topic and the monster from Monster Mayhem was both from emails. We would love to have more, so please, please.
Go ahead and email us right there, howweroll@gmail.com. If you have something you would like us to discuss on Dialogues and Dice in our Let's Talk segment, please send us that. And if you have the concept for a monster, case in point, Dead Kid sent a very brief little 2-line description, and I created this from that. So you don't have to be able to stat it. You don't have to be able to do all those things. If you can and want to, and just want me to kind of look at it, critique it, and turn it into something presented like this, let me know and I will do that for you. But if you just have an idea, or hell, if there's a monster you would like in your game and you would like to have a nice monster manual type sheet created for it, that's cool too. Just go ahead and throw it out there and it'll end up in Discord. So, now how to get a brain to come up with ideas to suggest. There you go. But
don't worry, Beta. We have plenty of other topics to discuss. We have backlog, so we're good. I mean, but we will try to take your suggestions into account.
Yeah, up and coming episodes will be, as I said, terms and misconceptions of D&D terminology. The difference between species and a race, and the moral dilemma of alignment that goes into that argument, which will be a heated one, I think. Probably something that might be a little triggered for some people. We'll have to see, but we'll try to present it in a fairly normal way.
I think we might be a little controversial on that one, but it'll be fun regardless.
Hey, controversy is fine, right?
Yeah.
As always, everything on here is just our discussion, our open thoughts, our opinion. Nothing is set in stone. Anything we say is nothing more than that. We try very hard to be politically correct. Sometimes it's difficult to do so, but you know, we try to avoid the difficult, ugly things to discuss. But yeah, so if you have any ideas, go ahead and get them over to us and submit them, and we will happily talk about them. Alrighty, let me see here. Okay, last but not least, as we move on for tonight,
Questions and answers.
a quick Q&A session. So if there's anything you want to ask us, whether it's show related, D&D related, anything related within reason, we will endeavor to answer them for you. And it's 9:30.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, this depends on how many people have questions to ask, because if you guys have nothing, we're out of here, and
That's
you're
it.
just stuck with nothing.
There you
so
go.
keep us around. You know?
Some of the guests that we've had in the past, just to give you ideas, we interviewed Gary Gygax Jr. We interviewed Sky Hilton, who is at the time was a student of HEMA, which is Historical European Martial Arts. In other words, she wore plate mail and fought with a sword for real. Not reenactments, real combat, like belting each other hard and stuff like that. Kind of like what you'd see at medieval times, but not scripted. She now actually owns a studio and is a maestro of teaching such. And she has that was a great interview, because she really was like, look, I'm just going to be honest with you. Combat in D&D is bullshit. That's not how fights really happen. You know, people are more likely to hold on to a longsword, get up close and pummel the crap out of each other with the hilt, and elbow each other and jostle and grapple than stand there ting-ting-tinging away.
Or swinging wildly, right?
Yeah. We had... what was her name? The redheaded psychology girl that used role-playing...
Kelly Dunlap.
Kelly Dunlap, yes. Follow her on Twitter if you find her. Kelly Dunlap is a licensed psychologist that uses role-playing games and D&D and video games to help people with mental disorders to great effect.
Yes, I mean, they're all amazing, actually. I mean,
So, I mean, we have had some seriously good guests on in the past. We can get some more for sure.
I mean, we did your old role-playing buddy.
We met Dave Harris, who was...
And Dave Harris, yeah.
Dave Harris, who was one of the very first people I ever played around the D&D table with. When we were kids.
R.T. Stouty.
R.T. Stouty, the creator of Tortured Earth. We actually ran that on this show for a little while. We gave away a bunch of books and stuff.
You interviewed diversity in the role playing community with John Shelton.
Shelton, yep, he was a guy that did a whole bunch of articles and a TED talk on exactly that, diversity, what it means to be all inclusive, not excluding people based on color, race, sexual preference, orientation, viewpoints, political standards, any of that stuff. He was one of the pioneers of the not at my table concept. Like, the gaming table is meant for everybody, and not a place to be excluded from.
There you go, Beta. Those interviews are all on our YouTube under the original Dialogues and Dice Talk show that we did.
There you go.
You can see the different format and how it's changed and evolved, right?
That's it.
Any other questions?
They are there, right there for you, Beta DM.
And we did 24 of those.
Beta DM has a question.
Okay.
He says, yes, I have one.
You raised your hand when we saw, virtually, right? Because,
We'll give him time to type his question.
Type it out. Anyone else as well? was a nice little stroll down memory lane.
It was, wasn't it? And Mythical Paladin has a question as well. So we will try to answer both of those before we escape.
It's funny because a lot of you guys were typing really awesome things and asking questions while we were doing the Let's Talk. So we kind of skipped ahead.
Thoughts on the next D&D version coming out? That's a hard one because it's still coming out. Some of the stuff that I've seen really leads me to believe it's just a very slight rehash of 5e. My biggest hopes would be better action economy, streamlining some things, dare I say, before I get flamed, playtest it a bit better, and be a little bit more consistent with who creates the rules and how it's all put together, so you have less weirdness between certain things.
Like the wording, right?
Yeah. They're bringing back Spelljammer. I was never a huge fan of Spelljammer. But it was a popular campaign. They are also bringing back Dragonlance, which I was a huge fan of Dragonlance. So if I run anything campaign-wise, it'll more likely to be Dragonlance than Spelljammer. But again, we generally don't run a whole bunch of published stuff. This Curse of Strahd jaunt that we're doing right now is a break from that. But that's also because we're reworking it quite a lot. Matt's played it before, and he's already noticed quite a few differences between the version that we're playing and where he ran it before out of the book. But way more of that will become far more apparent as it goes on.
Beta, we'll answer that in a second. I will just answer my thoughts on the next D&D version coming out. Tara, I'm worried that they're going to take more options away. I'm personally a fan of the alignment system in 3.5 edition. I'm a fan of the base attack bonus and how it's different, where now it got stripped of proficiency modifiers, which is the same for everybody. I'm not a fan of those. They just like, what's the point of proficiency bonuses when you just, they're all the same, right? Like, I'm worried that the next edition will. I'm for working on the rewording, like the wording, so it's consistent. Because some things say this is clearly an action or a bonus action. Action economy is another issue as well that Gore mentioned. But some of them don't say that. And Gore literally asks one of us, well, what is that? Is that an action, a bonus action? And it's like, it doesn't say in the text what it is. So is it a free action, a swift action? I mean, it's not clear. And the words is one of my concerns. The other concern is some of the mechanics being removed. I personally like base attack bonus and skill points. I like putting skill points every level into things I want to make it better. I don't like the fact that when I create my character, I choose 5 or 6 depending on the class and whatever I choose or feats I take, and that's it. Never touch it again. It's like, come on. I want to have a concentration of like plus 24 because that's what I want my character to be able to do. And it's like, no, you're just proficient.
Yeah, it's kind of that thing. Back in AD&D, there were no skills. Everything was stat based.
Right.
Everything you did, you picked whatever stat best fit the skill and you rolled for it. Then in 2nd edition and 3rd or 3.5, they decided to have it to where you could have this vast array of skills. And then in 5th, they narrowed that skill list down. I feel, this is just my thought, either you need to have all the relevant skills or don't have any. I can see that. I'm not a huge fan of the current skill list. I think there are certain skills that it's missing that are kind of important. And I don't like having to go, what really fits this? Well, none of them really fit this.
Yeah.
So I feel like I want a stat roll. But it's a skill system, so it's not meant to be stat roll. And so There's just some things like that. They're minor things.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of this is preference. This is about preference, not right or wrong. I started playing, as I said, in 78. I played OD&D, red box, blue box, purple box, pink box,
Right.
then to AD&D, then second edition, then 3 and quickly to 3.5, dabbled with 4 but kind of said, you know what, I don't want to go this route, I'm staying with 3.5. Then we carry on playing 3.5 for some campaigns, and we also play 5e. You cannot argue that 5e is simple. It is easy to learn. For the most part, it's relatively streamlined, although there are some things that are very counterintuitive to that. Certain spells come to mind. Confusion spells.
Multiple dice rolls.
And when I say I wish there was more continuity in the creation, again, if you look at that example, look at the confusion spell and see how many dice rolls are required in a combat round with that spell if it's on the table. Seems to go very much against the concept of what they were trying to do with 5e. I don't know this for a fact, but I know a lot of different people worked on 5e. I'm not entirely sure that the continuity was there that should have been there. But again, you live and learn. It was Wizards of the Coast, they took it over. It was a new thing for them. They had Magic the Gathering. Now they took over D&D and had to rebrand it and make it their own. And so 5e was, let's be fair, it's not a terrible attempt at reworking D&D. They're going to learn a lot, I feel, from 5e, and I'm hoping that in 6e, they keep what worked and fixed what didn't, and that's the idea. The danger always comes that they want to, they have said that it is going to be backwards compatible with 5e. So everything they put out for 6e, if you don't convert over to a new player's handbook, DMG, and all of that, is supposedly going to be backwards compatible. That tells me, Wizard did do 3.5, yeah. That tells me that it's not going to be that different. Otherwise, it wouldn't be backwards compatible.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, they did 3.5. I guess to clarify, my point is 3.5 was a very minimal rework from second edition. They changed some of the mechanics, but it wasn't a huge overhaul of a concept because they really didn't have their handle all the way around it. I liked 3.5. I thought 3.5 offered a lot. I also liked 5e. Second edition.
I love the prestige classes and how they work into things. I really do love the skills, the vast array, because you could really get a sense of a character based on what they're proficient in skill-wise. Whereas in 5th edition, everyone has proficiency in perception.
Yeah. But at the same time, to play devil's advocate, 3.5 requires a lot more time, a lot more investment, and a lot more energy to learn, whereas 5e, while it is simplistic, there's some advantages to that. So again, it's more like it's preferences. My quote is always this: I play whatever edition I have to homebrew the least to get the story and the feel I want with the least amount of effort. You can achieve any type of game, any type of feel, with any edition, to be fair. I'm not saying that you can't get the same level of gritty tension out of a 5e game that you can out of the 3.5. What I am saying is 3.5 tends towards it easier, and you don't have to change as much. Whereas if you want a more action-packed, fantasy, free-flowing game, you're better with 5e because 3.5 is going to be a lot more clunky and require a lot more. Yes, so you've really got to choose
very clunky.
Edition wars is a thing when people are, I hate this edition. Oh, this is the best edition. I don't believe there is a best edition of D&D. I don't believe that. Never have, never will. They are all different. They all have nuances. And you as a player or as a DM are going to have a preference.
100% agree. The best edition of D&D is Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay.
Of which to answer Junk's question, when will Warhammer come back? It's supposed to have been back the last 2 weeks, but unfortunately, due to crap that showed up and caused problems, it didn't get done. So, but there is a worst edition, 4E. Now, while I will agree with you, I know a lot of people that love 4E because they liked that aspect of what they did with it. So again, to me, it wasn't my favorite edition, but there are some people that to this day think it was the best edition. They are wrong, but no, I'm kidding. But that is a thing that again, so it proves preference. There are a lot of grognards that are older that you will never get them to play anything other than AD&D. They don't want to play anything other. They're happy playing what they play. They feel like there's no reason to change. Hey, you know what? If you're happy, I get it. Don't change.
Don't change it. Yeah.
There's the other aspect of the marketing concept. One of the biggest reasons that we get new D&D versions and stuff isn't always because they're trying to fix it. It is because once the sales of players' handbooks and core rulebooks and monster manuals and DMGs drops below a certain point, they realize they have a limited amount of resellability. By coming up with a new edition, their hopes are they will sell a new player's handbook to every player. They will sell a new DMG to every DM. They will sell a new monster manual, blah, blah, blah. That's the point. So it's important not to lose sight that they are running a business. And their job and their goal is to make moolah. All we hope is that what they turn out is worth buying.
I mean, it's literally light bulbs. They have the technology to have light bulbs that last a very long time. Yet they want you to buy more. So they have light bulbs that don't last forever and burn out because you have to buy new ones.
Yep.
What you do, keep coming back.
You were told 4E is more MMO-ish. It kind of is. It used a lot of things like spell decks, and which there's some of that in 5E, but they're more optional rather than required. It did a lot of weird things. It really did.
Beta asked a question that's related to our Let's Talk. How do you, as a cast, handle days where you just aren't feeling life in general, yet feel obligated, though probably shouldn't, to still make the show and be on camera?
Depends who you talk to. If it's me and Shagget, we're probably gonna dig deep and do it. There have been times when Shagget knows that I literally walk in from work, come back here, turn on the computer, sit down and stream. I don't have chance to eat, take a break, shower, anything. It's just, on days like that, there are times when I'm like, oh, I really don't have it in me. The trouble is, there are a bunch of us, and if every one of us gives in to that whim, it's probably going to be one of us on any given week that will never stream. So, for the most part, you have to kind of dig deep and do it. Now, if someone is legitimately sick, and is going to be a snotty, ugly, nasty, coffee, splurty, wretched mess on stream, then generally we don't have them on show.
Right.
That does bring up a point, and I'm going to ask chat a question. I wish there were more of you here, but you can answer. On nights where a player is not available, would you prefer us not to do the show and wait until that player is here? Or, where possible, would you prefer us to play anyway and be one player down? When we deal with that, what we've done in the past is all the players collectively decide on what that character would do. No one person takes over. They basically say, this is how the character has been played up to now. This is what we think they would do.
It's as you guys answer this question when we read the answers, when we first started How We Roll, there was 4 of us. So if one of us is out of commission, not excluding Gorbat, obviously, because he runs the game, there'd only be 2 players for 3 characters, right? And it was very felt. We actually started adding more players on our shows
to alleviate that.
So if someone was out of commission, we could still have a full show. That philosophy kind of changed later on, where, as Sass says, based on the story beat, like if it was an important story moment or story session, we would cancel if someone couldn't make it.
Yeah, and to Sass's point, that's exactly how I feel personally. Like tonight, we know that the players are in a very unpleasant scenario and there is very real risk of possible character death, therefore I wouldn't play a player down because I feel it's unfair to the player. On the flip side, there are some sessions where there isn't anything particularly mission critical going to happen and you could get away with doing that. I think what we're really trying to say is, on those nights, would you like us to do that, or are you happier when we say, hey, if a player's down, we don't stream? As a group, we have our own thoughts and opinions, and we are somewhat divided on it, which is why I feel we do this for you guys, so to some degree, we'd like your input.
Yeah, it's hard to rectify, and there's a lot of variables at play.
Yeah.
Gorbad and we are of the mindset that if we're not feeling 100%, but we can still do the stream, we'll do the stream. If I had a cold, I would take a Dayquil and to alleviate as much of my symptoms as possible, and I'd still have fun. Like, I can compartmentalize enough to not just be sitting here boring Drek for you guys. But there are others of our cast who legitimately, if they're not feeling 100%, they're like, I don't want to do it. And you see examples of that on our show. I mean, it's hard to hide, but it's fine. Like, it all works. Whatever works for everybody, I guess is what I'm saying. But it is different.
Yeah, that's it. It's
now,
so as I said, I mean, there's definitely times like tonight when the right answer is to say no, we have to wait.
Yeah.
But there are definitely shows when we could play and we just have one person shuttered, or like we've done in the past, just has a photograph of that person in the window and play around them. Those of you that have been around a long time, you've seen us do it both ways, so that's why I'm thinking that we can get a little bit of feedback from you guys and see how you feel.
And you've also seen where some people go cameraless. They go with just a picture, they're just audio only. And it's a different feeling for sure, but they're technically there. I mean, they just don't feel or look presentable, and they say, "Can I just be audio only?"
Okay, so I was mostly talking about being in a bad emotional state, and how as a cast you handle that. Do you make a concerted effort to let them take a back seat, etc.? Yeah, I think we do to some degree. What we do is we talk to the player and say, look, so if someone says, look, I'm really not feeling it tonight, I'm going to be here, but I'm not going to be on point, then yes, we try, the rest of the players definitely try to pick up the slack, I guess. We're very open. We have Facebook groups, private Facebook groups that all the cast are in. We talk all the time. We're always discussing everything together. We know who's doing what's going on in people's lives. If somebody's having a bad time and we know they are, we're quick to say, look, you need to take care of yourself. Just don't worry about streaming tonight. We got this. And then either Satch will do something or Shagger will do something, or we'll do something like this. So we try to fill in on those nights if we can. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. Just depends. But,
and the revamp of Dialogues and Dice is specifically for those nights. Like, if someone can't do it and the show can't be had, Gore will message me and say, up for Dialogues and Dice, and then we'll kind of work behind the scenes about what the topic will be, what the monster could be. Obviously our schedules withstanding, and because we would be available for the show, but there is prep work for this too. I mean, Gore did.
If it's and if we know it's a scheduled thing, like if we know someone's going to be out for a couple of weeks, sometimes I can write that into the story. But then there are other times, like tonight, you couldn't exactly suddenly decide that Satch's character just wasn't in the house anymore. And still have any level of real integrity to the story you're trying to tell. So, around a table, sometimes people will just say, well, let's just pretend he's not here and act accordingly. That's hard to do for a show that is story-centric and we're trying to have a story with a level of integrity. So speaking based on past episodes, when we had an episode of Player Down happen, some of my favorite moments have been players playing other characters, like when Jane couldn't make it and the players were doing Tolgar voice, etc. Other times, especially when it was clear that players weren't comfortable with playing them or afraid they'd get them killed, wasn't so good. Exactly right. And that's where we have a certain level of, a couple of our cast members, and I'm including everybody in this, so I'm not going to say on Mondays or Thursdays. A couple of our cast members have the opinion, all or nothing. It's either the whole crew or we don't play. Some of the others are like, the problem with that is that mentality has led to a lack of consistency.
Right.
If there's one gripe that I have with how we roll, it is consistency. We used to be on point every night. We never missed a show. Yep. Back to back, Mondays and Thursdays, we hardly ever missed a show. If we missed, there was a major reason for it. Over the last couple of years, COVID is a thing. It threw a lot of things on. But last year, we actually missed as many episodes as we streamed. Right. Statistically, we missed as many Mondays and Thursdays as we made. That felt bad for us.
Yeah, I mean, Echoes of Aldersea was 54 episodes. It's our longest campaign ever. And it went on for 2.5 years. Now, mathematically, 52 weeks out of a year, yeah, we missed a lot of episodes. And it is harder to miss shows when you're only doing them once a week, whereas before it was twice a week. We would do the same show, so there was always going to be content for the most part for the D&D show we were doing. But now that we have Thursday being a separate thing, it is a lot of missed shows. And
the original
it's a gripe of mine too.
Yeah, the original goal of adding more players was, if we have 5 players and one is down, we still have 4 players, therefore we can still play.
Right.
But if you don't do that, what happens is you now have 5 people, which means it's more likely that one of the 5 will have a reason they can't make it. So what we increased the cast to achieve ended up making it worse in one way, if that makes sense. And clearly you guys, I mean, Neo Gambit makes a very good point. Beta DM Dragon makes a very good point. Mythical Paladin makes a good point. Obviously, you guys are as divided on it as we are. That's what makes it so difficult. That's the reason I asked your opinion, because we are divided. Yeah. We absolutely believe that a full cast is the best option. When there cannot be a full cast, and it is not mission critical, is 4 out of 5 a good enough cast to run. Especially if you're in a situation where it's mostly roleplay and you can allow a player to take a back seat. So I guess what you guys are saying, and probably where I think we're landing, is we strive for 5. If it's an episode where 4 will work, we run with 4. If it's an episode where we really need all 5, we cancel or postpone and wait till we have all 5.
Beta, as personally, as per you're not feeling it, feeling not in a good mental state, I have felt that a few times with a few things that have happened. But at the same time, this show and How We Roll, as much as I love you guys and you guys love watching it, it is a reprieve for me too, right? Like, it is a source of fun and enjoyment. So often when I'm not in the mood I have a mental block or something happening in my real life that's causing me to feel sad or whatever we want to talk about, How We Roll has always kind of been there for me to perk up and be happy for a bit. So I can balance that. In the pre-show, I might be a little glum or quiet and muted, but when we go live, I know that I'm trying to entertain, and I love you guys, and I have fun entertaining, so I get through it, and it's not a problem.
Yeah, it helps us get through tough stuff as well.
Other of our cast, no. If they feel down or out, it really affects them, and it's understandable, and I'm fully sympathetic.
Some people can rise to the challenge and use the involvement to help them through. Other people can't do that.
Right.
Beta DM. So yeah, I see what you're saying. The reason it was agreed upon by all the cast originally to collectively control a character was so no one person had the responsibility of what happened to that character.
Yeah.
They chose collectively, which meant they could say, you know, well, I think Satch's character would do this. Yeah, that's consistent with what he's done in the past. Well, I disagree. I don't think. And if something bad did happen, Shagget doesn't have to say, hey, dude, I'm sorry, but I got your character killed.
I got you murdered.
Yeah. So that was their preference. You know, and I see what you're saying. And if a player specifically wants to do that, if Matt says, hey, Shagget, I want you to play my character, that's what we do. But the problem with that is it does put one player in the spot. And what it also does is it basically doubles up the screen time for that individual player.
Yeah. We have twice had Sass play one of our characters for a session, right? If I recall. She played Tolgar a couple times. And I loved every moment of that because she was like, I don't want to get Tolgar killed. It's like, you're playing Tolgar. The guy can't die. He's like 130 hit points and is resistant to everything. So you're fine, Sass. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we have definitely done that in the past. You know, and a lot of it depends on the character, the complexity. It's hard for somebody to step in and play like a level 12 caster.
Yeah.
There's a lot to know. Unless you are a diehard D&Der that has played casters to death and know them inside out, it's tough.
Hey, Jane.
What's up, Jane? Hello. Yeah, but Tolgar, on the other hand, big axe, go berserk, crush, smash. Fairly easy for Sass to fall into that role.
Yeah, I mean, that really falls. I mean, especially if the chatter is experiencing the character for the first time, if it's a high level character of a more complicated class, there's a lot of features that even sometimes the players forget they have. You know,
right, that's
like,
right.
How do I expect you to remember everything my character can do?
Beta DM,
there's a lot.
If it's a planned thing and we know that someone's going to be out and they want to do that, I am fine with that. The problem is, half the time, it's the day of or even the evening of when we know.
Yeah.
So we don't really have time necessarily to be able to contact that player and say, oh, by the way, you need to get all this done and ready for 7 o'clock tonight.
Also, you have to have a webcam with a microphone. I mean, you know, like the basics of being able to stream.
Is it doable? Yes. Have we done it? Yes. So, you know, hey,
should we do it more?
We're not opposed to that at all. So, alrighty. Well, I reckon we're about done for this evening. It's been a long Dialogues and Dice episode. It's lasted almost as long as an entire actual show.
Sure. Yeah.
Which, hey, that's cool, because it means you guys had a lot of content, and we went over a bunch of stuff. So we will definitely be talking about other topics in the future, as and when. As we've said, there is no set schedule for Dialogues and Dice. They pop up when they happen. But, as I said, if you've enjoyed it, by all means, check us out on the next ones. And right here, where the email address thing is, howweroll@gmail.com. Suggest topics that you want us to discuss, and monster concepts for Monster Mayhem. And we will make up sheets or fun stuff like the Epidemistress that we did for Milk, the Jackomancer that we just did tonight for
Jackomaster.
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 Yeah, we're at the end, Jane. These things originally are meant to last like 60 to 90 minutes at the most. It's interesting because we cover less topics, but they last longer than the old ones. So there you go. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, we will see you guys again real soon. Thursday, all being well, don't know of any reason why not, we should be launching Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay's second campaign for those characters.
Matthew Bain!
Matthew Bain and
Catarel, Aldette,
Aldette, And who's the other one? Matilda, that's it.
Bertilda.
Bert. Oh, Birdie.
Birdie.
That's it. So we'll hopefully see them on Thursday. Well, we've had a blast. Hope you did too. Thanks for everybody that hung out with us. We'll see you again real soon. Y'all take care. Bye.
Bye.